Very good evening everyone. Welcome to Bajirao IAS Academy, the Hindu news analysis. So today is 9th June 2025 and today we have some very important topics for the discussion. So one by one we'll try to discuss all these important topics in a very detailed manner. And remember, all these topics that we are going to discuss are very important from the exam point of view. So therefore, without any further delay, let's get into the discussion and let's understand all these important topics in a very detailed and in-depth manner. And the first topic that we're going to start the session is about the judiciary's take on Article 19 Clause 1 and Subclause A, and this is specifically talking about the right to free speech and expression. Now in this context, in recent times, so it is being said that freedom of speech and expression is one of the fundamental rights that the citizens actually enjoy, and in fact it also protects individuals from the arbitrary state action as well. However, in recent times there has been a growing trend of societal sensitivities, and in fact not just societal sensitivities but even the digital expression of citizens through the social media or through digital modes. So therefore, Indian courts are increasingly being called upon to balance the right to free speech with public order and national sentiment, and that essentially means that the freedom of speech and expression of one particular citizen or individual should not harm the public sentiment, the national sentiment and the public order, right? Because fundamental rights are not absolute in nature, they are subjected to reasonable restrictions, and that is what we should understand. So therefore, a free speech should not be considered as an absolute right, but it should be subjected to public order, national sentiment and all other conditionalities which are attached to Article 19 of the Indian Constitution. And remember that in prelims examination, fundamental rights are very important, and every year you can expect at least one question from the fundamental rights. So therefore, it is very important that you should understand the inherent quality and inherent nature of these fundamental rights, because in mains examination also there is a possibility and probability of a question being asked on the fundamental rights. And the most important topic is Article 19 Clause 1 and Subclause A, freedom of speech and expression. So this is evident from the fact that recent judicial rulings from the Supreme Court or various high courts, which are ranging from criticism of leaders to their artistic and academic expressions, which comes under the part of Article 19 Clause 1 and Subclause A, they actually highlight the need for a principled approach that the judiciary must have to take. And this principled approach that harmonizes the constitutional freedoms which are granted to the citizens under Article 19 Clause 1 and Subclause A with responsible civic discourse. So I hope you have understood the context of this article. Now let's move on to discuss the inherent points which are given on this article, right? So now the judiciary's sensitivity actually reflects the democratic maturity, because as of now courts are operating in a complex socio-political landscape. So no doubt that India is a diverse nation. So because of its diverse nation, and India is also having a multi-party democracy, and every political party, every individual can have the right to form the political party, can have the right to contest elections. So therefore there is a complex socio-political landscape which has been existing, because in India we have multiple religions, we have the different ethnicities, different languages and different regions. So therefore we can say that the courts today operate in a complex socio-political landscape. However, the courts attempt to ensure respectful public discourse, right? So there should be a respectful public discourse, and that should not incite hatred among the communities, hatred among the groups. So therefore there is a need for ensuring respectful public discourse, and that should reflect a larger goal of maintaining societal harmony. So societal harmony essentially means that different groups of people living together in peace, right? And groups imbibing the value of tolerance, right? So therefore, essentially, the courts have been trying to ensure the societal harmony without compromising the constitutional values. So whatever constitutional values which are enshrined in part 3, which is talking about the fundamental rights, and part 4, which is talking about the directive principles of state policy, and even the part 4a, so that is talking about the fundamental duties, right? So ultimately, the courts have been trying to ensure the societal harmony without actually compromising the existing constitutional values, right? So in those cases, such as, for example, Operation Sindoor, so post such incident, Operation Sindoor, this military operation, so judicial remarks actually reflect a growing awareness of the emanative power of speech in the digital age and the responsibility that accompanies freedom, right? So one thing that we should understand here is that freedom is not absolute, but a certain responsibilities must be attached to those freedoms. And in this case, Mahatma Gandhi also said that the freedoms are not given to every individual as a matter of right, but freedoms must be correlate with the fundamental duties, but every individual must perform certain duties to enjoy the fundamental rights. So therefore, freedoms also accompany certain responsibilities that the citizens must follow, and that is very important for the societal harmony, right? So societal harmony, tolerance, so everything can be possible when individuals who are enjoying the fundamental rights also perform their duties, also understand their responsibilities. In cases like Kamal Hassan's recent linguistic remark on Kannada language. So he made a certain remarks on Kannada language, that Kannada originated from the Tamil language, right? So in those cases, judicial advice promotes mutual respect to India's diverse linguistic and cultural fabric. So no doubt India is a diverse nation, so we respect the diverse values or diversity, and we also call India as a country which is unity in diversity. So therefore, it is very, very important to mutually respect India's diverse linguistic and cultural fabric, because there are multiple languages and there are different cultures as well. So one should respect the culture of others. So that is the essence of the value of tolerance. So therefore, it ultimately encourages reconciliation over the confrontation. So now courts have been trying to do the reconciliation rather than a confrontation of individuals who have not been performing their responsibilities, their duties, but just enjoying the rights only. So Kamal Hassan just made the remarks that Kannada has origins of Tamil language, right? So he says that it is his freedom of speech, but it should not hurt the sentiments of other groups, other cultures. So this is what the courts have been emphasizing on, right? Now courts emerged as moderators of the constitutional discipline, right? They are now being considered as the moderators of the constitutional discipline, right? So encouraging apologies in sensitive matters, it's actually an attempt to reduce adversarial proceedings and foster a climate of tolerance. That is essential and very, very important for a healthy democracy. And in fact, India is considered as a healthy democracy, right? So it is being said that even though some Western research groups say that India is not a healthy democracy, but I would say India is a healthy democracy, and therefore encouraging apologies in certain sensitive matters, so that could hurt the public sentiments, is actually an attempt to reduce the adversarial proceedings and also foster a climate of tolerance among different groups, different cultures. So that is a very, very important, and that is a symbolic nature of a healthy democracy, and that is what the courts have been trying to do now. And even in digital content cases, so for example, we all knew about the Ranveer Allahabadia and the derogatory remarks that he made during a particular show. in those digital content cases, courts are started engaging with the evolving norms, and they are also started seeking clarity on the limits of decency in the online platforms as well. And similarly, in academic and public commentators like Ali Khan Muhammad, so he is being heard in court, shows how judiciary is willing to engage with multiple stakeholders, and judiciary's willingness to engage with the intellectuals while examining the societal sensitivities as well. So therefore, now we can conclude that now courts have been acting as a moderators of the constitutional discipline, and that is essential for a healthy democracy, right? So that is also a symbolic of an independent judiciary. Now in India we have an independent judiciary, no doubt about that, and in any democracy independent judiciary is considered as one of the essential tenet. Now when we talk about a principle which is based on a free speech framework, so there are a number of complex cases because we have located in a complex socio-political landscape. So therefore there are number of complex cases. Now in this case, Indian courts continues to uphold Article 19 clause 1 and subclause A, and they are increasingly being urged by legal scholars to apply clear and present danger and incitement tests more robustly. So that essentially means that, for example, if any individual made any derogatory remarks against any other culture, any other religion, or any other individual, so it is important that whether such remarks are insightful in nature, they incite violence, they incite harm or the conflict between different groups, and that's very important, and that is what called as a clear and present danger or incitement test. So this is what the courts have to do, and the scholars have been urging for the same. So this is a scope for a further strengthening jurisprudence through a much more clearer guidelines on what actually constitutes harm under Article 19 clause 2, so thereby ensuring objective standards as well. So now the judiciary's cautious approach, through sometimes it may be criticized, but it also presents an opportunity for the evaluation of the existing processes, existing procedures, so thereby the best possible principles can be maintained and evolved by the judiciary, and that are in line with the constitutional values as well. Now in this case, the constructive judicial review can actually reaffirm dissent as an essential democratic right. Now what exactly is considered as a dissent? For example, the government has made a certain policy and government has come up with a certain law, and if you express your dissatisfaction and if you disapprove that particular policy, it must be called as a dissent of the government. So we need to differentiate between dissent and sedition, and that's a very important thing to do now, because when we talk about the dissent, it's just you are against the policies of the government, because the policies of the government are not inclusive in nature, and they are also discriminatory. So you are expressing your opposition to certain policies, and this is what is called as the dissent. And in fact, dissent is also considered as the essential tenet of Article 19 clause 1 and subclause A, and it is essential to Article 19 in general, that is talking about freedom of speech and expression, right? So I hope you have understood this, and this is what the courts must balance, the freedom of speech and expression along with the public order, along with the national interest, the sentiments of other cultures, because we are living in a multicultural, multi-ethnic, multi-religious and multi-regional society, right? So that's very important in a country like India. So I hope you have understood this article, and the next important article is the census exercise. And we are very often discussing about the census exercise, because now census is a very important exercise which is conducted once in a 10 years, right? Census exercise was due in 2021, but this decade 2021 we have experienced the COVID-19 pandemic and lockdowns everywhere, and because of the COVID-19 pandemic it was physically not possible to collect census data. But recently Union Home Ministry announced that they have started the census exercise, and most probably within a 1 year they would come up with the census data. And another important feature of this is that they are conducting census in the digital format. So I would say this is the first time that they are conducting census in digital manner. And apart from that, they are also conducting the comprehensive caste census as well, that they have been conducting. So these are two essential tenets of the caste census. And even with this census, there will be a delimitation exercise of state legislative assemblies as well as Lok Sabha. And apart from that, so there are certain concerns from the states in northeast as well as the southern states that with the delimitation exercise as per the new population census, so that would drastically reduce the number of seats that they are currently enjoying. But it has to be seen how the census data would alleviate the fears of the southern states and northeast Indian states about the decreasing the share in number of seats in the Lok Sabha. So apart from this thing, we also knew that Nari Shakti Vandana Abhiyan, so that has been provided 33% reservation of seats for the women in Lok Sabha and state legislative assemblies, and this census data would also be taken as a basis for the reservation of seats for the women in Lok Sabha and state legislative assemblies. And that's why the census data is very, very important. So I hope you have understood the brief background about this. Now the context is that the Union Ministry of Home Affairs has announced that the next census of India will be conducted in 2 different phases. So with March 1st, 2027 as the reference date. So this will be considered as the reference date, right? So you have to remember the reference date as well. There may be a chances of such things should be asked in your state PSC prelims examination as well, right? So this census data will be conducted in 2 phases, and March 1st to 2027 will be considered as the reference date. And in fact, the census holds exceptional importance, exceptional significance due to its potential linkages with the caste enumeration, as I have already told you, and delimitation, and even the reservation of seats for women in state legislative assemblies and even in Lok Sabha. When we talk about the caste census, first of all, we'll try to understand the legal and administrative framework that is already in place for conducting such a comprehensive caste census in India. So when we talk about the constitutional status of the caste census, now census is listed under the Union list under entry 69. So 7th schedule of the Indian Constitution, it talks about 3 different lists: Union list, concurrent list and state list. Now when we talk about the Union list, only a Union Parliament have the powers to make laws on any subject which is mentioned in the Union list. And concurrent list, both state legislative assemblies as well as the Union Parliament have the power to make laws on any subject matter which is provided in the concurrent list, right? So therefore the state list, again the state legislative assemblies have the power to make laws on the state list subjects. Now here the census is listed under the Union list under entry 69 in 7th schedule of the Indian Constitution. And also remember, all schedules are very important for prelims examination. Please go through all schedules right from the first schedule to up to 12th schedule, because they are very, very important. And legislation which governs the census in India is a Census Act that has been passed by the Parliament right after India's independence in the year 1948. So this Census Act is a legislative framework that specifically deals or provides the legal and administrative framework for the census. And in fact, census in India is conducted by the Registrar General and Census Commissioner of India. So you should not forget that, because this is very, very important, that census in India is conducted by the Registrar General and Census Commissioner of India, and this is an office under Ministry of Home Affairs. And the field operations are managed by state appointed officers with manpower primarily drawn from the teaching community. Particularly, the government school teacher would constitute the manpower who would go for the census, right? So it is also said that this is the census for the first time after 1931. The comprehensive caste census will also be covered under the general census, right? So the caste will be enumerated for the first time in a census since independence, because last time the caste census was conducted in the year 1931, and after that this will be the next time that the caste census again conducted. And in fact, it is said that conducting caste census will lead to expansion of a caste-based quotas in jobs, education, and especially for the people who are in backward classes, and it even leads to the subcategorization of the existing caste groups. For example, within OBCs, there are a number of castes who are still considered as most backward, and reservation benefits are not actually reached to the most backward communities within OBCs, within SCs, within STs. So it will also pave way for the subcategorization of the existing caste groups as well. And even the caste-based quotas will likely breach 50% cap set by the 1992 Indira Sonai judgment. However, the 10% of the reservation that has been provided by the Parliament for the economically weaker section groups already breached the 50% limit set by the 1992's Indira Sonai judgment of the Supreme Court as well. Remember, Article 103 of the Indian Constitution, 103rd Constitutional Amendment has provided a 10% reservation for the economically weaker sections, right? And apart from that, the whatever data that we have, this data might be used to create a sub quotas within SCs, STs, OBCs for the purpose of reservation, and this is what is called as a subcategorization of caste, and that would benefit the most disadvantaged groups within those caste groups, right? So therefore, what is the significance of 2017 census? We need to understand the significance of the 2027 census as well. So this is the first time since 1931 that a detailed caste data for all Hindus may be captured, and that's the one thing to which it is very significant, right? So detailed caste data of all Hindus may be captured after 1931. And it is also said that there are a number of political parties which are demanding for the caste census, right? So there are a number of states which already conducting the caste census as well. For example, Karnataka, Telangana, and even in Bihar also. So therefore, it actually fulfills the long-standing demands of civil society and the political parties. And Article 82 mandates reallocation of Lok Sabha seats post 2026 using census data, right? So in fact, Article 82 of the Indian Constitution talks about the delimitation commission must be established by the President after every census based on the Delimitation Act passed by the Parliament. And apart from that, the risk of political marginalization for southern and smaller northern states as well, because it is expected that, so if delimitation exercise is conducted based on 2027 census data, so delimitation would be primarily done on the basis of population. In northeastern states and the southern states particularly, they have done exceptionally well when it comes to controlling the population growth rate. But if we started allocating seats based on the population of 2027, now compare the population of the southern states with the northern states. So northern states have not performed well in terms of controlling the population growth rates, but southern states have performed well. So because of this low population numbers, there is a risk that the southern states would lose their representation in the parliament. So if delimitation exercise would be conducted, and that's what the southern states have been strongly contesting, right? So therefore it has to be seen how the center or the delimitation commission would address the concerns of the northeastern states of India and the southern states as well, because otherwise it would lead to the political marginalization of these southern states and northeastern states. So there is also a constitutional amendment that has been passed, which is called as Nari Shakti Vandana Abhinayam. So that talks about 106th Constitutional Amendment Act of 2023. Right, so 106th Constitutional Amendment Act of 2023 that has been provided a 1/3 or 33% of seats in Lok Sabha and state legislative assemblies. So therefore the delimitation exercise would also ensure 1/3 of seats to be allocated for the women as well, and in fact the 2027 census data to be used for operationalizing this from 2029 general elections, right? So the 33% of the reservation for women would be operationalized from 2029 general elections based on 2027 census data available. I hope you have understood the significance of census 2027. And the challenges, what are the challenges which are existing currently? There are a number of challenges which are existing. Originally the census is due in 2021, but the census has been delayed due to the COVID-19 pandemic, and now due to the administrative complexity of caste enumeration. So this could be another challenge as well. And in fact the administrative at the local level, the teaching staff would be used to collect the census data, and it is also said that it would impact the education at the grassroots level, because the teaching staff would be used to collect the census data, and this would create further problems. And the southern and northeastern states, as I have already explained to you about the concerns, right? So the loss of political representation, and they would be further politically marginalized due to the population based seat allocation, and northern states which have not performed well in terms of controlling their populations, but southern states performed very well in terms of controlling their population, and this would be a disincentive on the part of the southern states, right? So whatever southern states did to control the population and is now disincentivizing them in terms of less political representation or further politically marginalizing them. And there is a need for a robust digital infrastructure as well, and the data protection mechanism, because this is the first time that the population data would be conducted, or census would be done based on the digital mode. So therefore there is a need for the robust digital infrastructure to collect the information, to store the information, to retrieve the information whenever needed, and the potential data protection issues also existing, right? Because it's a huge data that is collected at the all India scale, so therefore it is essential to protect such data from the attacks. So therefore it is important that we need to have a robust digital infrastructure and data protection mechanisms for caste related data. And in fact the concerns over staff training, especially in areas with low digital literacy and logistical difficulties, right? So this would be another concern that would be faced while conducting the caste census. So it is important that we need to overcome all these discussed challenges, right? So it is being said that the caste census would be conducted the census would be conducted in 2 phases, right? So I hope it is clear for you. And the next important topic, it is about the electric vehicle scheme. And recently the government of India has announced the electric vehicle scheme, and the objective of the electric vehicle scheme is to boost the local manufacturing, because we have targets that by 2030 we need to have this many number of electric vehicles on Indian roads. But here the problem is that there is no private company which has been producing electric vehicles on a significant scale. When there are no companies or only one or two companies which are engaging in producing manufacturing electric vehicles, so there will be lesser competition, and the electric vehicles also would be much more costly because there is no competition among the companies. If there is a competition among the companies, that is only possible when there are multiple companies. We can expect that the electric vehicles which are manufactured in India are less costly and they are more affordable for the Indians. So in order to attract the foreign firms which engage in electric vehicle manufacturing, recently the government has announced certain incentives for those foreign firms so that we could attract those companies which manufacture electric vehicles, right? So ultimately it is all about the green transition, because we no longer depend on fossil fuels, because when we burn the fossil fuels they emit the greenhouse gases and India will not be able to meet its obligations as well, right? Because 85% of our fossil fuels are imported from other countries, right? So therefore we need to substantially reduce our dependence on other countries when it comes to the import of fossil fuels, and we need to address the climate change and the greenhouse gas emissions from India, and we need to meet our existing obligations. And therefore it is very important that India need to make a faster green transition. So to make a faster green transition, we need to promote the consumers to produce consumers to use the electric vehicles. However, electric vehicles as of now, they are too costly compared to the conventional vehicles. But when we have the multiple number of electric vehicle manufacturing companies in India, imagine A, B, C, D, so all these are different companies. So in order to attract the customers, what these companies would do, the companies would cut the costs because they would invest in new innovations, new technologies, and that would make the electric vehicles more affordable for the consumers. So if electric vehicles would be more affordable for the consumers, so they would be less costly for them, and the consumers increasingly adopt the electric vehicles as well, and that is the objective of the government here. Now the context is that recently the Ministry of Heavy Industries notified the long awaited policy to promote the electric passenger car manufacturing in India. However, this allows the lower import duties for electric vehicles if firms invest locally and meet localization targets to strengthen India's electric vehicle ecosystem. So I hope you have understood this brief background here. Now, what are the policy highlights and the investment mandates from the government? Now, this scheme is expected to cut down the customs duty on the fully built imported electric four-wheelers. So earlier, the total customs duty would be around 70 to 100% on those fully built imported electric four-wheeler vehicles. And if any company which is ready, for example, imagine there's a company called Kia. So if Kia invested a certain sum of money in India for electric vehicle manufacturing with 25% of the local component, now Kia can import the fully built imported four-wheelers with a lesser customs duty of just 15%, and that could be valid for the 5 years. I hope it is clear for you. And in fact, this offer would be applicable. This incentive would be applicable only for the electric vehicles which are priced at $35,000 or more are eligible. And in fact, firms must invest around 4,150 crore within 3 years with 25% of the local manufacturing. So local manufacturing in the sense that, for example, this car is manufactured by Kia and this is the electric vehicle. And in this car, 25% of the components must be sourced from the local industries, right? So 25% of the components must be sourced from the local markets, and within 5 years So 50% of the components must be sourced from the local market. So this is the mandate that the government has set through this policy. And imports at the reduced rate are capped at 8,000 vehicles every year, right? So they can only import 8,000 vehicles every year. So the total duty foregone under the scheme is capped at 6,484 crore. It is what the government has said, right? So there is a three-pronged plan to boost sale of electric vehicles in India. For example, one is pushing demand for the electric vehicles from the consumer side and increasing supply by attracting number of electric vehicle manufacturing companies and creating a robust ecosystem in India, particularly the domestic ecosystem, right? So when we talk about pushing demand, no permit for electric vehicles in public transport, taxis and auto rickshaws. So these are certain concessions or incentives that the government has been providing. So a set of policies that the government would adopt to push the demand and also increase the supply and also creating a robust ecosystem as well. However, there are certain concerns with respect to electric vehicle manufacturing in India with respect to creation of ecosystem, technology and priorities, because experts argue that the benefits will materialize only with the technology transfer, but the foreign electric vehicle manufacturing companies are not ready to transfer the technology to domestic electric vehicle manufacturing companies, right? So therefore this could be a major challenge that we would face, because we would substantially dependent on these foreign companies to manufacture electric vehicles. We may not be able to create an ecosystem in India that can actually produce electric vehicles on a large scale by India's private firms. So this could be the major challenge. So secondly, India must avoid becoming a low value component assembly hub like the past global trade setups. So India should also careful about this and should avoid this as well. So critics urge that emphasis on research and development, skilling and innovation similar to models in China and South Korea has to be focused, right? So R&D, skilling and innovation has to be done, and that makes the private firms would come up with manufacturing the electronic vehicles instead of depending on the foreign firms to come to India and manufacture electric vehicles. So this could be the more sustainable plan that India should focus on a long-term basis. So India's electric vehicle market in financial year 25 was led by three-wheelers, so which is mostly dominated by the three-wheelers of around 57%, but not four-wheelers, which accounted for only 2.6% of the total sales. And the public transport electric vehicles need policy support due to their mass usage as well, because that also plays a very, very important role in reducing the vehicular emissions, and people would depend more and more on the public transport as well, right? So this is what the policy is for manufacturing electric vehicles in India, and this is what the government has come up with, right? So apart from that, electric vehicles would play a very, very important role when it comes to India's complete transition into the renewable fuels and reducing its dependence on fossil fuels. So the next important topic is a military exercise which is in news, is a Nomadic Elephant 2025, and this is one of the most important military exercise because it is conducted jointly by India and Mongolia. So Mongolia is a neighbor of Russia and China. So it's the 17th edition of the bilateral military exercise called a Nomadic Elephant 2025 between India and Mongolia has started at the Special Forces Training Center in Ulaanbaatar. So there may be a question that the Nomadic Elephant is a military exercise between India and which other country, and the 17th edition of Nomadic Elephant held or took place in which places. So there's a possibility of such questions being framed. So this edition emphasizes a UN peacekeeping simulation, counter-terror operations, interoperability in semi-urban and mountainous terrains. So all these are important aspects for India, because we have the mountainous and difficult terrain with China, with Pakistan also, and in fact counter-terrorism is one of the main objective of our security forces. And similarly, the peacekeeping, India is one of the largest contributor to the United Nations peacekeeping force as well. So therefore these are the essential things that the nomadic elephant would focus on. So this is a bilateral military exercise, and this focuses on non-conventional warfare such as counter-terrorism. And apart from counter-terrorism, UN peacekeeping operations, right? So these are the essential things that it focuses on. So it even enhances the interoperability and tactical coordination between Mongolia and the Indian forces. Now, Mongolia actually shares the border between Russia and China, as I have already told you this. And in fact, it is expected that the nomadic elephant military exercise would strengthen India's Act East and Central Asia outreach, acting as a strategic counter to Chinese regional influence. Because in recent times there is an excess presence of China in the Indian Ocean region. So it is very important to counter China for India. So therefore this nomadic elephant military exercise is a one opportunity for India to counter Chinese adversity in the Indian Ocean region. So it also showcases the military diplomacy and ability to operate with the partner nations in challenging terrains as well, because Mongolia is a country which is having the challenging terrain. So it reinforces India and Mongolia's defense cooperation, institutionalized through training, shared tactics, and even the cultural exchanges as well. And it simulated UN peacekeeping operations that replicate the multinational real-world missions, which aligns with India's global peacekeeping role. So remember, as I have already told you, India is the largest contributor, one of the largest contributor to the United Nations peacekeeping force, and India also part of many successful UN peacekeeping operations as well. So therefore this replicates the real world missions, aligning with India's global peacekeeping role. So I hope you have understood this. And apart from that, there are a number of military exercises that India regularly conducts with other countries. So therefore you have to remember all these military exercises, because in recent times there are questions which are asked on these aspects as well. So that's all in this lecture, and thank you so much. If you like our class, please subscribe our YouTube channel and also hit like button. So if you have any doubts, so please write those doubts in the comment section. We feel free to address your doubts. Thank you so much.